I'm Chris Nessie, host of Behind the Mic, Voices of the EPN, a part of the Education Podcast Network. Just like the show you're listening to now, shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another great episode of My EdTech Life. Thank you so much for joining us on this wonderful day. So hopefully today you've had an amazing day, wherever in the world that you're joining us from. As always, thank you for all of your support. We really appreciate all the likes, the shares, the follows. Thank you so much to all our new YouTube subscribers. As you know, our mission for this year is to get to 1,000 subscribers. And we're about like a little bit about maybe 200, 300 short, or at 280 or so short. But so if you haven't done so yet, guys, please jump over to our channel and you can go ahead and subscribe so you can go ahead and continue checking out some great content there as well. And I definitely want to give a shout out to our sponsors. Goose Chase, thank you so much for supporting us in this last year alongside content clips as well. Thank you always for your support. And definitely want to give a big shout out to Lucid for Education. Thank you. And Eduate, of course. Thank you all, Thomas Hummel and Thomas Thompson. Appreciate all of your support as always. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have an amazing show for you today. And I'm really excited because we have two founders, creators of this amazing app, or amazing platform, I should say, who I've had the honor of meeting prior to the show. And I was in awe. Like I mentioned, there are many platforms that are out there that do some great things, that are doing wonderful things in this space. But this one to me was just jaw-dropping in the fact because of the feedback. And we're going to talk a little bit about that right now. But I want to introduce you to John and Jeff, who are the founders of Snorkl. So Jeff, how are you all doing this evening?
We're doing great. Thanks for having us on. This is really cool. We're excited to share.
Excellent. John, how are you doing?
Great. Good to be here.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited to just dive right into the chat because I know that you guys have a lot to share. And like I mentioned, I was definitely in awe of what I saw in the demo. And like I mentioned, there hasn't been a lot of things that really just kind of like, whoa, like this is amazing. But this to me, I guess maybe because of my experience in the classroom, I can definitely see this as something that I was like, yes, this is a must have and it's a wonderful tool. So thank you so much. So let's go ahead and dive in. And as we always start the show, I definitely love to start with kind of that superhero origin story. So as we know, every superhero has a story and they've got a beginning. So I definitely want to go ahead and learn a little bit more about you so our audience can definitely hear a little bit about your background and really make that connection with you all and the work that you're doing. So we'll go ahead and start with Jeff. Jeff, can you give us a little introduction and what your context in education is?
Yeah, absolutely. So John and I met in 2012 in Las Vegas. We were Teach for America core members. And, at that time, I think there was 120 odd core members that year in Las Vegas. And I think like 60 or 70 of us just by happenstance ended up in a couple different apartments off the 215, if you're familiar with the area. And so basically all these first year teachers fresh out of college, and we all lived right next door to each other. John was a couple doors down. And so we'd leave in the morning, we go to our schools, we teach all day, work our butts off. And then at night we would be able to come back, share stories, improve, reflect. Obviously, later in the year, we're in Vegas, we're young, we had fun. That's pretty natural. And, I mentioned that because that's how, John and I met a lot of other really wonderful educators as well. But we really trusted each other because we saw each other, at our best, at our worst. We help each other improve. And so I taught elementary school. I taught fifth grade. I loved it. Used a lot of technology in the classroom. And interestingly enough, I wanted to put together, at the time, this is an extracurricular. Computer science is quite common these days, but for a fifth grade teacher 10 years ago, I put together a short unit on computer science. And I realized a couple things. One, I actually really like coding myself. And two, there might be a really wonderful opportunity to build new tools. And I figured what better way to do that than to learn how to code and do that myself? So I've spent most of the last decade writing software as a software engineer at a handful of different startups. And, John and I obviously stayed in touch. I'll let him get into his background, but a couple years ago, we started jamming on a few different ideas coming out of the pandemic for how software might improve and provide a really neat set of features for teachers. And we've been working on it ever since. John, I'll let you.
That is great. Yeah, that's wonderful. All right. Yeah, go ahead, John. I want to hear your story too as well.
Yeah, I taught high school math in Las Vegas, and then I stayed in the math classroom. So I spent most of the last decade as a high school math teacher. Loved it, and also loved getting my students to think about math in new and creative ways. The last few years, I was an instructional coach at a high school here in Minneapolis, and then Jeff and I, like he said, started talking about some ideas to really capture student thinking in some really rich ways and use some neat tech tools to do so. So one of my big focuses in my math classroom was about making math about more than just students' answers, but about their thinking process. And so Snorkl was really born out of some conversations Jeff and I had about doing just that.
That is great. And, interestingly, I love the way that you all met. I am familiar with Las Vegas. Actually, I did 1 year of teaching at a charter school in Bullhead City, which is an hour and a half away from Vegas.
Yeah.
So I'm very familiar with the area. So that's kind of interesting that's where you guys met too as well. And so that's great, just to hear the way that you all made that connection and, you just kind of bonded your same interests and things of that sort. And then, of course, being in education and doing it for several years. So I definitely want to dive in now as to what you all have done and have created and that I've been able to see. And so tell us a little bit, and we'll go to start with John this time. So John, tell me a little bit then, where this idea came from. And I know you mentioned about, making the classroom a little bit more amplifying student voice, being able to give feedback to as well. So you two knew each other, you met, and then now all of a sudden it's like, hey, we've got this idea. So tell me a little bit about your side, John. How did you tell me how this story kind of came to fruition, and of course with the inception of Snorkl too as well.
Yeah, I think first off, some of the things that were true about what I was trying to do in my own math classroom was I really wanted. I mean, my own experience in high school math is I was always good at math, and I always thought that math class was really boring. And then ironically, I grew up and I became a high school math teacher. And I think one of the things that sort of opened my eyes to think differently about math was some of my experiences with math in college, where math just felt much more rich and creative. And so I was trying to bring that oftentimes to my own high school math classes that I was teaching. We really wanted to emphasize students sharing their thinking, communicating a lot with each other. I'm a big fan of the work of Dan Meyer, of Joe Bowler, of Peter Lildahl's Building Thinking Classrooms. So trying to get students to really put their thinking at the center of what math class is all about. And so I think that was sort of happening in sort of what I was doing at the classroom at the time. And then Jeff gave me a call one day where he was like, hey, I'm thinking about some ideas, thinking about exploring what it would look like to build a different platform. And I know Jeff had talked to some folks about what they were doing teaching in the pandemic. And one of those ideas that came up quite a bit, I think, was teachers were having students record themselves solve problems because there wasn't really any other way to do it in the pandemic. And I think I heard that and I thought, well, student thinking is what I'm trying to raise up in my class, even when we're not virtual teaching. And so there's probably some really powerful ways that we could support that with some neat tools. And so that sort of led us down this pathway of building Snorkl.
Oh, that is amazing, and I'm just going to go ahead and go off on that a little bit too. Being a former math teacher myself, I started off as an algebra teacher, and then I moved down to elementary, where I did elementary fifth and sixth grade, I should say. And I absolutely understand what you were saying as far as trying to get the student process, the thinking, the discourse, and being able to visually see the thought process. And I think for me, in a very similar fashion, it was something that I was always striving to do, and not just learning it like just the standard algorithm or in the standard way of doing things. But I think for me, the most important thing was obviously seeing how the student is learning and then being able to fix any misconception. So it was a great feedback for me, but it was also great feedback for the student as well. So that is great. And so then, Jeff, now you're like, hey, you know what? We've got something going on here. So tell me a little bit about now on your side, from the feedback that you were getting, now saying, hey, how do we marry these two? So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I guess like from where John left off, we wanted to create this platform, that can record and capture so much of what our students are thinking. So many different ways that kids interact or express what they know. You're just getting that like little piece of what they actually do know, and then there's far less to go off on. As John alluded to, I was interviewing a ton of teachers. This is like late 2021, coming off of the pandemic. Most teachers are still the wounds are fresh. The pandemic did a lot of teachers wrong in so many ways. It was tough. But they, out of necessity, as John mentioned, people were using screencasting tools to have kids demonstrate each other thinking. And I just remember thinking, wow, that is such a rich way to show what you know. It's just such a more robust approach. John and I, jumped on it. We said, yeah, there's definitely something there. So we ended up building, we experimented a lot. We met with, I think in our first year, 2022, we weren't like, let's go out, let's launch this product. Let's just listen and learn and collect feedback. And we had like a little like basic like alpha version of the product that we tested with a handful of folks where, teachers could give kids questions, they can record their response. And what we found is that they agreed with us. They're like, yeah, this is a really rich, really fulfilling task, but what do you do with the videos? How do you, like, teachers just don't have time to sit there and watch and give feedback on all of the student thinking. It's just overwhelming. It would take hours and hours of extra time each day. And I'll pass it back over to John because there was just, really fortuitously a few different technologies came on the map. I think we all know what they are. That allowed us to do some really, really neat things and kind of take this really interesting approach to showing your thinking with the actual capability for like, just your everyday teacher to get something really powerful out of it, which was really, really cool.
Excellent. So yeah, so John, I mean, tell me more a little bit about what Jeff is talking about and just expand on that, because I'm getting really excited to hopefully just be able to demo this. But I definitely want to talk about, just like you mentioned a little bit, Jeff, that teacher piece, because I know that the video portion was something that was very useful, but you're absolutely right. Also, it does take time to go back and review those videos and so on. So now, John, tell me a little bit more about how, now we're seeing how Snorkl is coming to fruition here and moving along with the new technology. So tell us what that next step was.
Yeah, I think there came up a time over that last spring where we just realized that like we have that really rich artifacts of student thinking, and wouldn't it be amazing if there was a way to capture it, analyze it, give feedback on it, and allow teachers to have insights on it like instantaneously. And like, I think we never set out to build an AI tool, but once we've realized what we could do with AI and the rich artifacts we were capturing from students, it just felt like a really automatic, natural fit. And so there was we got really excited about it all at once, and it all of a sudden really rapidly sort of shifted gears into, okay, now we're incorporating this AI element, and we're not really sure where that's going to take us. But once we started looking at what it did with the student work that we were running through, the scripts we had created and the tools we had built, it was just like instantly we were really excited. We were like, oh, we got to show everyone what we're doing here. And so, yeah, so that's sort of the direction and trajectory that we took off on in the beginning of this school year, and has just kept growing and growing. to create what Snorkel is now. And so I guess that sort of like leads us up to, maybe should I jump into like a quick demo here?
Absolutely. Yeah, we would love to. So go ahead and if you click there on present and be able to share your screen, that would be great, because the world definitely needs to see this. Because one of the things that you mentioned that I am a big proponent of is, like you mentioned, having those learning artifacts and being in the classroom. About last time I was in the classroom was 8 years ago, but still then, even the years prior, being able to work with just a Google Workspace, and of course different artifacts. We had Screencastify at the time, a lot of other products, and allowing students to really share their learning in a different modality. But obviously students were turning it into me, and I still had to go back and grade. And like you mentioned, still having to look through those videos, it does take some time. But of course I was able to hear the students speaking, fix any misconceptions. So that was the big bonus. But I loved what you demoed for me, and hopefully right now we can get that going. That'd be great, so we can get everybody to check that out.
Great. So I'll share my screen here, and I'll just give a little preface to this, which is to say, I think one of the things that what makes us who we are and that we really value is inviting students to explain and share their thinking. And so you're going to see that it's really prominent in what the Snorkel platform does. Is we think when students share their thinking, it allows us to celebrate their thinking in deeper ways than just the answer. Like I was alluding to before, it allows us to give really meaningful feedback on that process. It gives us as teachers really deep insights into how students are approaching and solving problems, and not just for math. We started thinking specifically about math, but what we found is, like, obviously it's really valuable to have students share their thinking in any subject and content area. And so we started with this idea in math class, and now we've got teachers using this in science and social studies and world languages and just across the board. So that's been a really exciting sort of natural evolution of where this has gone.
This is amazing.
But so this is a Snorkel assignment as a student would see it. They open up a link that their teacher shares with them. They sign into their Snorkel account, and it brings them to this digital whiteboard where they've got a question or a prompt from their teacher. This happens to be a 4th grade math example. But on this digital whiteboard here, students have different tools to draw, highlight, type out text, and create a response to the question that's here on the screen. And so they can show their work in some interesting ways. And then really the heart of a Snorkel assignment is that they make a recording and share their thinking. And so we think it's a deeply engaging way to invite students into the learning process. And so when they are ready, they press this purple record button, and I'll demo this here live. So I'll press this purple record button. I'll give a short explanation of how I solved this problem, just so that you can see here what that feedback process looks like for students. It's pretty quick, but I'll record. So I got a rectangle here with a perimeter of 146 centimeters. It says that the length is 29 centimeters. So I'm going to label one side 29 centimeters and the opposite side 29 centimeters. If the total perimeter is 146, I'm going to take away those two lengths. I'm going to do 146 minus 29 plus 29 is 58. So I'm going to do 146 minus 58. And that gives me 88. And if I have that 88 left for the two widths, I'm going to split that in two. 88 divided by 2 is 44. And so that width of the rectangle must be 44. So students record, again, really rich opportunity for them to share their thinking, solidify their understanding, or catch their own mistakes. And then they press that submit button. And when they do, our AI automatically starts analyzing their response. And it's going to provide them with really personalized, time-stamped feedback on their explanation. So again, not only giving students obviously really awesome personalized feedback, but giving teachers a really powerful tool here for getting that feedback to all their students instantaneously, and automatically scoring that student work.
Oh, wow, that is amazing. So just to kind of go through this again, I love what you did in the sense that this is very similar to what we saw during pandemic as far as using the videos. So it still keeps that nice video aspect of it. Students are recording, they're recording their ideas. You as a teacher now are observing, their steps, the thought process, how they're learning and explaining it. And that always that's one thing that I always loved about it being in the classroom is that oftentimes, sometimes as teachers, we would explain things one way, but then all of a sudden the student did things in their own way, which I found very useful too, because then I was able to learn from them, and then I was able to kind of use those strategies too as well to help facilitate the learning. But what I love here is that we're seeing this amazing output by Snorkel, and like you mentioned, in during following those timestamps and giving that feedback. And I mean, I'm seeing some great feedback here that says this great job on labeling the length of the rectangle, helping to visualize the problem. So this to me doesn't look like anything that is out there right now, which to me really excites me, because this is something that I find very, very useful, because you're getting that feedback in a timely manner. But just the fact that it's also very encouraging, like we see here, timestamp number 2. Hey, you did a great job at explaining why you subtracted the length of the perimeter, and it's keeping a very nice answers that are still using math vocabulary. And I know we'll talk a little bit about that too, how the teachers can kind of set up the rubric as well. But to me, this is wonderful and phenomenal to be able to have a, I guess I would say, like a co-teacher or an assistant, or I don't know how many people may say this is my co-pilot, whatever it is. The teacher here has a great way to give that feedback through your platform and still be able to see the student work. So I find this just jaw-dropping right now. This is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, we try to take a really asset-based approach to student thinking. So, I mean, obviously, I solved this question correctly, but if I solve it incorrectly, it's going to find specific things that it can praise still in my work, as well as prompt me with really specific questions to help me get unstuck or to retry. What you see, there's a respond again button up here in the corner. Students can really quickly and easily utilize that feedback. But I think this is one of the things that makes Snorkel unique. Is most other platforms, especially in math, but a lot of different ed tech platforms, student gets the wrong answer, and what do they get? They get immediately a red X. They're told they got it incorrect, and they're shown videos of someone else doing it right. And I think that's not our approach at Snorkel. It's really to praise and validate what goes well in student thinking, and then give them the specific support that they need to either rethink or try again, in the way that a high quality teacher would with them in the classroom.
Yeah. One thing that I love that you mentioned is you're absolutely right as far as many of the platforms that are out there, including some of the ones that I see within my district, where it's the practice is there, but then it's the red X, and it's almost just very punitive and very discouraging for the student, because like you mentioned, immediately once they get that question wrong, there's a tutorial video because we do have a platform that does that, a tutorial video that shows a person solving the problem. But again, at the same time, it may not be, sometimes what I've noticed is with a lot of those platforms, they don't teach it in the manner that we may be teaching it within our district, or maybe something that's a little bit more standards aligned. However, what I love about this here is the fact that it doesn't feel punitive, and you don't see that large red X. And one thing that you mentioned is that it will show the students some praise for the good stuff that they did, and say, hey, although you only got maybe 3 out of 4 points here, you did great here on this, you did great here on this, but now let's just improve on this section. And again, also to the fact that they're able to respond again, like you shared there in the video, I think in the demo, I think it's something that's very important, because many students do feel very discouraged, and especially with math. I think, one of the things that I found is it's many teachers teach the way that they learned it, and they don't offer, just a variety of ways of teaching it with manipulatives or just a little bit more visuals. And this, what I love is that, to me, it serves a purpose like a virtual manipulative, because you're writing, you're recording, you're still doing the math. And as we've seen here in Texas and many other places, this is where testing is going into that online mode. And before you know it, the students are going to have to construct, maybe using digital manipulatives, but there is going to probably come a point in time now where they're going to have to record themselves too as well, showing that they have mastered that content. So I think that you are very well ahead of the curve here. And I'm really excited, not only for the math part, but because you said you have science and you're working on building up more libraries. So that's something that's very exciting. So I want to ask, what has been, from the schools that you've been able to work with and being able to pilot this, and I'll go with John here, what has been that initial response from the teachers? And maybe if you've been able to get some feedback from students as well, what is it that you're hearing? Are you hearing that excitement? Are the students feeling a little bit more confident? Is it building up their confidence? What are y'all seeing?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the first pieces of feedback we noticed that we get a lot is actually teachers are surprised and impressed by how often their students are actually really using that feedback and immediately submitting another response. And I think that even when students aren't asked to, we get feedback all the time that's like, I can't believe that my students are willing to try this like 3 times in a row. And I think part of it has to do with both the immediacy of the feedback and the extremely personal nature of it. I think just like double click on the idea that I think you just alluded to around like, there's something ironic about so much of the math conversation these days is around getting students to discuss and talk and share and be creative. And so much of the math ed tech is very, very much the opposite. It's very, very, fill in the box, watch someone else do it. And so we're not that, but back to your question, I think it's, a lot of excitement and enthusiasm around the immediacy of that feedback and what that provides for students. Teachers who've told us that they've heard more of their student thinking this year than they have ever in the past, which is really, really exciting. And I think that certainly is important in any math classroom or any classroom. I shouldn't just say math, but especially in the context of a school that's got a really large English language learner population, where developing English language proficiency is a top priority. Snorkel is just like an awesome tool to give students that practice. So if they're developing, they can continue practicing in English. If they're new to country, they can record on Snorkel in any language. So someone who's new to country can actually record in their native language. They can get feedback in their native language. And suddenly you're giving access to student thinking that would probably otherwise be missed. And so we've had a lot of enthusiasm around supporting English language learners as well. And then just being able to capture and see that student work.
I love that. And Jeff, what is it that you're seeing? I'm pretty sure it's the same thing that John is saying, but I want to hear from you. What are some of the things that are exciting to you from what you're seeing, teachers tell you about and what students are doing?
Mm-hmm. Well, first off, I should share that, being the person that's writing all of the code, I have to unfortunately sacrifice a lot of the direct interaction, which as a former teacher is a bummer, but I know that I do get a chance to interact with teachers and students quite a bit. And honestly, it really hits home for me in that, like when I was younger, I sometimes struggled to convey my thinking in traditional means, in writing and showing my work visually. But I was always much stronger just being able to communicate and share my thinking that way. And I think a lot of kids, if you look at how they're usually using technology, they're almost always silent. They're sitting there, they're, tapping on the keyboard. And so I think for a lot of kids, there's this, this is a much easier way for them to bring so much more of this modality to play. There's so much power in their voice. And, you look back and as long as humans have been around, we learn to speak before we learn to write. And unfortunately, that's just not always honored in school, and for good reason. It's really challenging when you have 35 fifth graders like I did when I was teaching, to let them all, to listen to all of them, recognize what they're saying, give them that feedback, or facilitate that peer-to-peer interaction. It's incredibly challenging. And so, I think that's, there's really two things that every teacher will come to us and say, wow, we love that they're able to do this really interesting, rich, rigorous activity, and that they get quick, immediate feedback.
Yeah, absolutely love that. And I think, like you mentioned, although maybe you don't have that much interaction because like you said, like you're there and you're programming and you're writing the code and everything, but I just want to say thank you on behalf of, all the teachers and even myself and all the great teachers that you're going to be helping, because this is something that is amazing. And the way that you've written this in such a way where just looking at that feedback for that problem, was a feedback that was it honestly, like when reading it, just it didn't sound very robotic or anything. It sounded great, and it's way better feedback than what many students would get through just other platforms that are out there, like we mentioned, seeing somebody else do it. But the fact that this also encourages the students to continue to improve, because it's a great way that they visually see, like, hey, I got only 3 out of 4 points, but guess what, I can try this again and I can make it better. Then you're hitting on so many modalities, like John was talking about, because now if you're, let's say, an emergent bilingual student coming into the country, now you have the option of still making the math accessible to them in their native language while they acquire the academic vocabulary. They're working on language skills and acquiring the English, that proficiency. They're working on the math. And so the one thing that I love is that it's almost like there's no barrier to entry for anybody to be able to try this. And to me, that is the most valuable thing when there is a platform such as yours that can allow any student to come in and be able to work and not feel left out. It was very difficult for me when I was in the classroom, when I would have students that would come in from Japan and Korea, and then I would have students that would come in from Israel. And so I had to have an iPad and sit them there next to me and use the translate feature. But the look on the students' faces, just they saw me trying. I mean, I was trying what I could within the means that I had at the time. Uh, but now to be able to have something like this, and if I were to go back into the classroom, this would definitely be a lifesaver in that sense. But most importantly, that the students would not feel frustrated or singled out. And I really appreciate that. You guys really thought this through. And that to me, like I said, blows me away, because while a lot of the tools that are out there do automate certain things and help teachers create certain things a little bit quicker and so on, this is the one platform that I've seen that is very student centered, student friendly, and also it's a great help to the teachers as well, because you have evidence, you have a video. And for me, those artifacts too, I tell teachers, whenever you can get an artifact, should you need to go to the meetings that we have with the alphabet soup meetings, the IEPs, the 504s, the ARDs, and so on and so forth, you can show growth and say, hey, look, this is where this student was at the beginning of the year, but look at where this student is now. And oftentimes we focus too much on the end product and not on the process. And here you're able to see that learning process and that growth from beginning of the year to the end. And that to me is exciting, that there really isn't any platform that I can even come close to comparing you to that is out there, because you guys are on a league of your own. And again, and this is being very sincere, because I see this in my position and in my current role, the countless platforms that are out there, but this one is different, and this one is definitely good and worth the investment on it. Like I mentioned, it's the return on instruction is like wonderful. It's out there, so I love it. So thank you so much for doing that. Now I want to ask you, now obviously we know that artificial intelligence, and this has been a hot topic, and we see a lot of platforms out there and so on. And I know, like, I wanted to talk to you, and there is a question here that I must ask, because I am a big proponent. I consider myself a cautious advocate. And of course, I'm always looking out also for, for my student population, teacher population, and so on. So if you can just tell us a little bit as far as the data side of it and the privacy side, what is it that you all at Snorkl are doing to help, at least put our teachers, district parents, students at ease as far as, the data privacy aspect of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I could jump on this. So first off, from from a policy and, just how we handle the data and how it's treated legally, it was really important that we really dived into what are the relevant laws, what policies and procedures need to be in place. And we make sure that we have that, that we're meeting all of the needs these basically every state is going to have. They're a little bit different in each state, but we want to make sure that we meet all of the legal frameworks that are out there. We have all of our documents and policies have been certified by a nonprofit called One EdTech. We are also going through and should finish the certification process from iKeepSafe for COPA, California's privacy laws, given their strictness. If you can get approved there, then you're good pretty much everywhere, from what I'm told. And we just want to make sure that that is all in place and that people feel very comfortable that, if they're giving their data to us, that we're going to treat it right. Then from, obviously, as an engineer, from my background, I spent most of the last decade working in education, working in healthcare, where, you have to make sure that you have the best practices in place, that no stone is left unturned, in terms of how you built the platform. And that was a consideration from day one. When the first line of code that I wrote, I, considered the NIST framework, and I considered the different pieces that would need to be incorporated from that standpoint. But actually, as for the artificial intelligence piece, obviously that came in a little bit later in terms of the development. We do a few things that I think are really important. One, just our relationship. We do use OpenAI for some of the core models. There's an agreement that we have in place. They're not going to save or use this data for any training purposes. They don't do anything nefarious with it. That's actually obviously incredibly important. But just as another step in precaution, we have a handful of algorithms and back-end engineering processes in place that will essentially strip out the personally identifiable information before we send it there. So if some reason something did happen, which once again, the contracts that we have in place say that they won't, and we trust them, and there's a lot riding on it for them to get this right too, which is also critically important. We reduce the likelihood that anything, that anything negative will happen with that data. And then, yeah, John, that feels like it covers the policy and engineering things. Is there anything from a teacher standpoint that you wanted to add, or?
Yeah, and actually, I think Jeff, you answered that very well. And for John, on John's side, actually, I want to ask him, too, as far as the curriculum aspect side of it too, as well. Now, I know I did see, in the demo that you did share with me, that there is, for Texas Teaks out there and everything. So I want to ask you, as far as developing, because again, every state is different and there's so many things that you have to go through. So I want to ask you, like, how do you manage, on the curriculum side, or that aspect, to be able to create those lessons and making sure that they are standards aligned depending on the state or within the region, or on the standards that, the districts may be using nationwide?
Yeah, great question. There's a whole other side here, which we haven't really explored yet, but which is like the teacher side.
Mm-hmm.
And on the teacher side, like, we don't just see this as this is not just like a black box where students are talking to AI and they're getting feedback from AI. On the teacher side, they're seeing all this collection of rich student work. All right, here, let me show it real quick.
Yeah, and this was really cool. So I'm glad that you get to share this with our audience as well.
And then I'll circle back to the curriculum question, because I think that's an important one too. But as a teacher, I can see all these really rich artifacts from across my class all at once. The AI has automatically sorted them into the buckets of correct or incorrect as students are submitting their work. I can see that little label there in the corner for how strong that student response is. And if I take my cursor here, I can just quickly scroll over that video to preview my students' response and their explanation there, and how they are, the automatic closed caption there at the bottom showing their explanation. Obviously, as a teacher, you can jump into any of these student videos and flip through them quickly. You can add additional feedback and in the form of both written comments, but also in the form of video comments on top of student work, which we think is really powerful. And then as teachers, obviously, time is critical, right? And so we leverage AI to actually give teachers insights into how all their students are doing across the whole class. I know oftentimes as a teacher at the end of the day, I'd be sitting there with a pile of my exit tickets, and it would take me 30, 40 minutes to sort through and organize and figure out what the trends were and what I need to do next. Here, we're using AI to do that pretty much instantaneously. And so after students submit their work, they can look at this AI analysis page, which will tell them the top exemplars from across the class that they might pull from to share with students. It'll tell them the trending misconceptions from across the class and who's making those misconceptions so that they can specifically pull those students into small groups and support them with additional help. And so, again, leveraging this not just as a student tool for feedback, but a really strong teaching resource and instructional resource. And then you asked a question about curriculum. So teachers can both create their own problems in Snorkel. They can upload something to the Canvas. It's super simple and easy to do and share that with their students. We also have a collection of pre-created Snorkel activities. And our approach there is, and actually I think we're maybe the odd ones out here are sort of unique, as I think a lot of AI tools right now are trying to do AI created curriculum materials. And we are not. Like we have veteran teachers who have a lot of experience in the classroom who are creating high quality content and for us to use on the Snorkel platform so that teachers can go in there, quickly grab an assignment and send to their students, and then leverage that power of the AI for that feedback. But we're not using AI generated curriculum materials right now. We're trying to look closely at state standards and Common Core standards and create rigorous materials that we know students are going to see on state exams and things like that to help guide how teachers get started in the platform.
Oh, and that is one thing, like I said, that I definitely praise you highly for, because when I got to see what you had made available as far as TEKs are concerned, and then when I got to do and work on that problem while you were walking me through the platform, I was like, this is a problem that is definitely not AI generated, because I've tested everything that is out there, and then you put in like, well, here's the standard. I'm going to put 44H in here for Texas and math. And then all of a sudden you get these problems that you're like, what? Like they just don't make any sense. And here, what I saw was something that looks very similar to what a student would see in a state test. And that to me, like I mentioned, I think does not, I mean, and you said like, I don't know what the word or the phrase was, but really it does set you apart in an excellent way. And having those veteran teachers really create that line up with those standards is definitely a big plus. And I definitely appreciate that. And that's why I was blown away, because you are definitely seeing things from that educator perspective, and you're really teacher centered, but also in the student centered approach too as well. And you're hitting on both of the modalities, on the teacher side and on the student side. And that is really exciting, because like I mentioned, that immediate feedback like you just shared right now, being able to scroll through, it doesn't feel like, oh my gosh, I have to sit here and watch, 30 videos and they're all 2 minutes each, 3 minutes each. But the way that the AI helps you as that assistant to filter out the great ones, the in the middle of the pack, and then of course we see the ones that need improvement on. But I also loved what you said, that you can pull some of those wonderful exemplars from and then share with students, and now you've got students teaching other students in an indirect way, through those exemplars. And it just kind of brings everything full circle for me. That's why it was really exciting to see that, because if I was in the classroom and if I had to be in the classroom again, this would be my go-to. Like, this is going to be that one tool that is going to help me out and really get that feedback to be able to give that just-in-time support and fix any misconceptions on the fly. So, which is something that a lot of the other platforms that are out there don't do right away or with this immediacy. And that's the great part, that here you get to hear the student thought process, see the student work. And then as a teacher, we can say, okay, maybe this one was on me. I need to just reteach misconception. Or if it's a small group, maybe it's just that 2-3 minute kind of clarification. And now I don't have to be overwhelmed with a large tutoring group, whether it's before school, after school, or even a Saturday tutoring. So this has been great. So thank you both, Jeff and John, for what it is that you're doing through Snorkel. I'm really excited. So I want to ask, and I'll start with Jeff first this time. What do we see, or where do you see Snorkel, with the success that you've had right now through your piloting program? But what is next as far as, Snorkel is concerned? What else do you guys have on the pipeline that you might be able to share?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, like just to respond to a few things that you said about, product development and seeing it, like John and I are both teachers. And one of the cool things about that is that, as we think about new features and ideas, like we can just close our eyes, imagine the classroom and be like, yeah, this is going to be cool. Like other teachers, they're going to be excited about this. And that's an incredibly important, feeling and intuition. And we definitely, we listen to that, and we obviously speak with a ton of teachers as we build new things to check our thinking and to get other ideas from them. Everything in this app has come from a real teacher or student, and a ton of them. So I guess I'll just go short term and long term. In the short term, the next kind of big feature we're thinking about is, how can we help professional learning communities? How can we help school leaders see, from all the standards that they're working against, that they're responsible for helping their schools meet, and all the students that they're helping, where are they, color coded by student and standard, where they're progressing, and then just having all of those, it's almost like having competency-based grading, automatically added, and the artifacts right in there. And then you have an opportunity to then work with, if you're a coach, work with the teachers that you're working with, where you can look at, how students are doing. You can lead reflections and PLC meetings and do a lot of really, really neat things. In the long term, though, you said it. I think we are a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of where the way that we collect and gather and analyze student data is going. I don't think overnight, every single teacher in the country is we're going to use Snorkel and we're going to use this type of modality. I think that there are a million reasons why that's not going to be an overnight thing, but I think the trending direction is there. And I think the reason is really simple. Kids have so much brilliance up in their brain, and they do not get a chance to share it every day. And I think that we can just go a long way as educators if we were able to unlock that and share that and build on that. And, you mentioned that some of the state STAR tests are starting to include these types of problems. And obviously testing is a small piece of the education framework. It's obviously very important at the state level, but I see that becoming really prominent there as well. But I think it's more the day-to-day, we need to get past A, B, C, D, multiple choice, fill in the blank types of tests and exams. And the hope is that by creating these new ways for kids to share their thinking, that we can get to a place as an education system where we really can build a more learner-centered, learner-respected system. And I think that our tool is not the only piece of that. There's a lot of other really neat tools that are being developed right now, but I do think it can play a really big role, and we're really excited about that. So.
Absolutely. I'm definitely excited about that. All right. And the last question will be for you, John. And why Snorkel? Where did that name come from?
Yeah, I get this question a lot. People have a lot of curiosity about our name. I think what the metaphor that we use is a snorkel is a simple tool that allows you to explore new things and see things differently. And so that's what we aim to be is that in the education world. Jeff also grew up in San Diego, so he grew up snorkeling, and it's a fun word too. So there's just a multitude of good reasons to have Snorkel as our name.
Excellent. Well, I'll be honest with you, and this is me just thinking, and I was thinking right now, I was like, okay, maybe I didn't know that that's what it was, just snorkel. I was thinking to myself, it's this is kind of clever in a way, because sometimes teachers feel like they can't breathe and they're underwater, but this is that one tool that can help them breathe when they feel like they're just drowning, so that was my thought. But again, I'm glad that it was a little different, but like I said, this definitely, like I said, for me is definitely a breath of fresh air, and it can definitely help me just tread water and tread water lightly and just feel that I know that I'm getting the best out of my students and encouraging them. And like you said, even themselves, being self-motivated to give me a better answer because of the way that they're getting that feedback. And so for me, this is definitely it. This would definitely be my Snorkl in helping me in the classroom for sure. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time this evening. Thank you so much for all of your shares. Thank you for what it is that you're doing. Thank you so much for the demo. And I absolutely wish you the best in what it is that you're doing, and that you continue to grow, and hopefully just being part of this show too, and being able to put this out there too with my audience can definitely help you all continue to grow, or at least connect with more educators to be able to do some wonderful things. So thank you so much for letting me be a little part of this kind of the Snorkl fam in that sense, to be able to share out the amazing work that you're doing, because that's what this show is all about: amplifying educator voices, creator voices, and founder voices. So thank you. But before we go, we always love to end the show with the last 3 questions. So hopefully you guys are ready. And so we'll go ahead and start with Jeff on this one. And we know that every superhero has a weakness or a pain point. So for example, for Superman, kryptonite was his weakness. So Jeff, I want to ask you, in the current state of education, what would you say would be your current edu kryptonite?
My current edu kryptonite. That's a phenomenal question. I'm not even sure if I know how to respond. So I'm the superhero in this story.
Yeah.
And the question is,
what is your edu kryptonite? What is your pain point right now in education? What just makes you weak, either when you hear it? Is something through edu speak? Is it a practice? Is it a thought? Something? What would you say right now is your edu kryptonite?
It's a great question. Yeah. I mean, so when I wake up in the morning and I start coding, there's a lot of things that fire me up and get me excited. But, and by get excited, I mean, like, we need to do something about that. I think there's 2 things. One is from the student perspective, and one's from the teacher. So like as a student, when I was teaching, I saw a lot of kids, once again, just typing on the keyboard, silent, passive. I just, it's got to stop. We have to create a way that gives kids opportunities to actually share what they're doing and being more active in their learning. And the other one is just, more on a personal note. And, I think teaching is incredibly hard. It's wildly hard. And there's so many reasons why valid reasons why a teacher may want to leave the classroom. But it just always breaks my heart when someone feels like they don't have what they need. They don't feel supported, and it feels like the best option for them is to leave. Because I know that there are so many kids that are relying on them and need them. And once again, zero fault to them. You're one life to live, and you got to do it. But that is just always the toughest thing to hear, because we think we all have friends that have faced that decision over the last, especially 4 or 5 years. And and so I think like a good part of like the motivation of what we're doing, at least when I think about my work, is let's try and build something that it's not going to solve those problems. Let's be real; it's not going to solve probably the top 3 problems that a teacher faces in terms of work-life balance and many of the other things. But if we can do something really little but simple and make that their job just that much better, then it's worth doing it, and we got to go get it done. So
absolutely great answer. Thank you so much for sharing that, Jeff. John, now to you. What would you say is your current edu kryptonite?
Yeah, I guess I echo a bunch of what Jeff just said. I think that I go back to the math classroom and just like the way that math gets treated. And this is part of why I think when I was a kid in high school, I didn't think math was all that great. It's just treated as sometimes very narrow, very prescriptive, and not really a place to bring your full self or your creativity. And I think changing that definitely motivates me.
I love that. I love that. And I'm a big proponent of amplifying creativity. And who says that math class can't be creative? And I think now to also just be able to have those discussions and discourse and allow students to really share their thought process in a very creative way. I mean, this is creative. I mean, they're dialoguing or using academic vocabulary, they're writing, they're typing, they're hitting all of those different modalities, and at the end they get that immediate feedback too as well. So that's great. That's wonderful. All right, question number 2. This time I'm going to start with John. John, if you could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
I think like the positive message that comes to mind is like, be curious. Like, I would want to encourage curiosity. I think curiosity is part of how we build empathy. It's also how we, like, I think curiosity is at the core of learning. And there's a lot of talk, I think, in education about rigor. And I think rigor starts with curiosity. If you're not getting your kids curious about something, no amount of like challenges you throw at them are going to get them engaged. And so I would choose the words "be curious" if that's not too cliche.
That's good. That's great. All right, Jeff, now to you. If you could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
So I just have to be totally transparent. The first thing that jumped into my head would be, I think it would be really funny to put John's face on a billboard, just because I think that would be funny. No words, just John's face. Maybe like a confused look.
Snorkl.app.
Yeah, I was going to say, no, that actually gets to the.
That was my second answer. Is just put our logo.
I was just going to say that and where we are as a company and what we need to accomplish. Maybe just putting Snorkl on a billboard would be the prudent thing to do. So that I would go with that. We'll keep it simple.
Sounds good. Hey, that works. It works. Like I said, you can put anything on it. All right. And the last question, we'll go ahead and start with you, Jeff. The last question is, what is a hobby that you have or a favorite activity that you wish you could turn into a full-time profession?
I do it every day. I get a chance to code and solve puzzles and build things. I grew up playing with Legos, and I was pretty strong in certain things. And I honestly, coding is hard in the beginning. It's like learning a new language, but once you speak that language, and you're fluent, it really does just feel like you're playing with Legos again. And obviously, with there are some considerations that are very important, security and whatnot. But I still have a lot of fun with it.
Love it. Wonderful. All right, John, over to you. What would be one favorite hobby or activity that you wish you could turn into a full-time profession?
I like writing. If I had a second life, or maybe in the future, I'm going to become a writer.
There you go. Is there anything in particular that you'd like to write about?
I studied math and philosophy in college, and so I like philosophy and theology and reflecting on politics and education and all the questions that feel really big in my mind. But I'm sure my thoughts aren't all that interesting to anyone else about those.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much for sharing, guys. I really appreciate your time. Thank you, as always, from the bottom of my heart, just really, again, for being here today, sharing what you are doing, and obviously bringing it down to my audience too as well. That's definitely going to be listening to the episode. And I'm pretty sure that after this episode's released, you're definitely going to have a lot of follows and hopefully people reaching out to you to learn more about what Snorkl can do for them. So thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you. And for all our audience members that are checking us out, thank you as always for making my EdTech life what it is today. We really appreciate all of your support, all of your shares, your follows, your comments, and your feedback. You know that we do what we do for you so we can bring you some amazing conversations and just to bring you some amazing learning here day in and day out, or I should say week in and week out. But thank you as always. And please make sure that you stop by our website at myedtech.life, where you can check out this amazing episode and the other 265 wonderful episodes with educators, creators, founders, practitioners, and we've got a little bit of everything for you, so you can go ahead and take some of that learning and sprinkle it onto what you are already doing great. So please make sure you stop by our website. And if you haven't done so yet, please make sure you follow us on all socials at My EdTech Life. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and so on. And please jump over to our YouTube channel, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel. Our goal is to get to 1,000 subscribers. We would really appreciate that, as always. So, my friends, until next time, don't forget, stay techie.